Do you know why Stormtroopers look lethal in one scene and laughable in another? Most people blame the plastic armor and the bad aim and call it a day. But if you take a proper look at those quick cuts where a trooper drops, you'll realize they never really tell you what happened. Stormtrooper armor isn't useless, and here's the proof. And by the end of this video, you'll see how an elite core got mass-produced and why the suit wasn't the failure. You've been looking at Stormtrooper armor all wrong. Those glossy white plates? They're not the suit, just the shell. So what is it really? A sealed survival system that keeps a human functioning. Hard plates can't regulate heat. They can't manage sweat. They can't save your lungs when the air turns into smoke, dust, or chemical haze. That work has to happen under the armor, in the sealed layer against your body, where filtration and basic environmental protection actually work. And once you seal someone in, the threats get sneaky. Heat creep. The air feels wrong. Vision fogs. Your brain hits panic mode because the body reads it as danger. So if the inner system can't stabilize you, the outer shell is just cosplay with better branding. So why the iconic look? Because the Empire doesn't build a superhero. It builds a repeatable operator, a standardized body inside a sealed kit that can keep moving through ugly conditions. Why do the plates exist at all then? Because Star Wars fights aren't clean duels. They're corridors, hangars, blast doors, and spaces where the environment throws fragments, impacts, sparks, and debris at you. The plates are the outer buffer for that chaos, not a magic shield. Here's the part that flips the joke. Do people judge armor by the wrong question? Yeah, because they only ask one thing. Does blaster fire bounce? But most danger in Star Wars isn't a clean center mass hit. It's the secondary stuff that ends missions. Fragmentation from ruptured panels, concussive shock in tight interiors, smoke and sparks that steal visibility, flash burns that punish exposed skin and eyes. Even a glancing bolt can slam you into a bulkhead, knock you off a walkway, or leave you stunned at the worst moment. So what does good armor do in that world? It keeps you functional through chaos long enough for your unit to keep moving. Now, we hit the heart of the system. When does this stop being armor and start being a machine? The moment the helmet seals. Because the helmet isn't a decorative faceplate in Star Wars logic. It's an interface. It ties together comms, sensors, and basic support, so enclosed gear stays workable instead of turning into a panic box. And here's the word that matters most. Usable. Not perfect, not heroic, but usable. Why do some troopers look stiff the second the fight turns chaotic? Because corridor combat already overloads the nervous system, and the helmet mediates the senses. So the helmet has to stack jobs at once. It has to filter particulates, so smoke and dust don't become instant mission killers. It has to keep comms intelligible through engines, sirens, blaster noise, and shouting. It has to manage visibility, so harsh lighting and flashing warnings don't turn movement into guesswork. Different eras imply different levels of assistance, but the role stays the same. Keep the operator coherent enough to function under stress. Here's the price the Empire gladly pays, and everyone loves to clown. Do helmets make Stormtroopers better? Yes. Do they also introduce penalties? Also yes. A full-face bucket doesn't just add tech, it steals senses. The biggest theft is peripheral vision. In open air, humans can take in roughly 170 degrees across the visual field. Put a hard frame around that. Add thick edges, lenses, filters, and display clutter. And you can end up operating closer to 110 to 120 degrees on a good day, depending on design. Those numbers are human factors estimates, not a Star Wars spec sheet. But the effect is real. So what happens when your world narrows? You misjudge distance. You rotate your whole torso to clear corners. Your timing shifts because your visual input shifts, and stress magnifies the problem. That's why rookies can look awkward in a helmet even if they're athletic. They aren't dumb, they're recalibrating. And yes, this hits shooting hard. Can you learn marksmanship on a range? Absolutely. But can you hit the same shots while sealed in a helmet that alters depth cues, feeds comms into your ear, and regulates airflow? Not automatically. That's a separate adaptation. If the answer is not yet, the trooper isn't instantly bad. They're under-adapted. Give them time in the kit and it becomes normal. Skip that time and you get the classic look, a capable human operating through an interface they haven't fully merged with. Now, for the part the Empire actually cares about. Why not build the perfect suit for every planet? Because the Empire isn't just fielding soldiers, it's running a supply chain. So when do the add-ons show up? After the core stack works. Because the Empire doesn't want a different uniform for sand, swamp, snow, and flame. It wants one platform, then plugins. Here's the stack in plain terms. Start with the sealed layer that stabilizes the body. Add plates that blunt impacts and flying junk. Seal it with a helmet that manages breathing, comms, and perception. Then attach whatever solves the planet. Once you see it as a platform, the variants stop looking like style changes and start looking like problem sets. Mud Troopers prove the logic from a different branch. On Mimban and Solo, they're Imperial Army, and their kit is partial armor paired with respiratory gear and sealed bodysuits for brutal conditions. And specialist roles push the same idea further. Why does external storage show up so often in hazardous roles? Because if something goes wrong, you want distance from organs, and you want the option to ditch the risk fast. Same base kit, new environment problem, module solves it. And here's the most quartermaster detail in the whole design, standardization. Instead of tailoring armor to every individual, the system assumes a predictable human envelope. Use a baseline target like 1.83 meters, roughly 6 feet, and everything gets cheaper. Fewer molds, fewer part variants, faster repairs, easier swaps. That number works as a manufacturing target example more than a canon average, but the logic fits an empire that mass produces everything. A cracked chest plate stops being personal gear and becomes a replacement panel, and the material choice follows that mindset. Stormtrooper armor gets described as plastoid across Star Wars reference material, and that fits the job. Consistent, mass-producible, light enough to keep mobility high, and tough enough to take the edge off impacts and fragments. So no, the Empire doesn't build Stormtrooper armor to win duels. It builds it to keep standardized operators functioning long enough to finish a push, then keep the pipeline moving when enormous numbers of identical kits have to stay in service. Now let's kill the easiest argument. Why not Beskar if Beskar is so good? Because Beskar is elite craft armor, not a supply chain material. Even if you ignore scarcity, harder to work materials raise repair friction, slow replacement, and increase training burden. That undermines the thing the Empire values more than protection: momentum. Other exotic what-if metals fall into the same trap. So yeah, stronger isn't automatically better when the mission is occupation at scale. Here's the part that has nothing to do with materials science: control. Why do Stormtroopers feel unsettling even when they're standing still? Because you don't read them as individuals. You read them as a repeating signal. White armor, blank mask, identical stance. Your brain stops trying to meet a person and starts scanning for the next identical unit. And what disappears first when the face disappears? Negotiation. A face can signal doubt, empathy, uncertainty, hesitation. A helmet shuts that door. The Empire doesn't only want protection, it wants obedience that looks identical from every angle. Now tactics, because this is where the memes ignore the obvious. Why do they keep pushing straight instead of doing clever maneuvers? Because in boarding actions and facility clears, architecture compresses choices. Doors, hallways, choke points, junctions turn combat into lanes. That environment rewards cohesive pressure, so the Empire leans into doctrine that fits tight spaces. Stay coherent, keep moving, let pressure do the work. That's why the Tantive 4 hallway in A New Hope hits the way it does. Rebels are boxed into a narrow interior with smoke, flashes, and panic. The Stormtroopers don't look invincible. They look steady, and steadiness is the advantage in a place designed to make people freeze. Now zoom out, because the Stormtrooper Corps isn't frozen in one perfect form across the timeline. Do the dates matter? Yeah, and they tell you what the machine is doing. Obi-Wan Kenobi is set about 9 years before A New Hope. Andor is framed as a story that begins years before Rogue One and leads into it, with the series structure explicitly built around that ramp. Andor shows early enforcement where corporate security and local forces handle routine control with uneven quality and shortcuts. Then, the Empire reacts the way it always does when challenged. Centralize authority, bring in heavier oversight, escalate. At the same time, the Imperial machine increasingly relies on ordinary human recruits drawn from across the galaxy. Star Wars reference material supports the broad transition idea people already assume. Early Imperial ranks include clone veterans, but the long-term core becomes recruit-driven. Stormtrooper helmets evolved faster than the humans inside them. You get a force that looks less sharp on average, even if the gear stays functional, because the bottleneck isn't the armor, it's the pipeline. Selection, training hours, live drills in enclosed conditions, and the adaptation period where the helmet stops feeling like a cage and starts feeling like a tool. You can accelerate manufacturing, but you can't compress human calibration the same way. And paranoia makes it worse. What does a fearful regime reward? Compliance. Rigid procedure buys obedience. It also reduces initiative, especially in messy situations where improvisation and local judgment matter more than marching forward. And here's why the First Order looks cleaner. Finn is the clean example. FN-2187 is a designation, not a name. That isn't just branding. That's pipeline design. When you raise someone inside the machine, the helmet doesn't feel like a barrier, it feels normal. The output looks sharper because the training and the gear were built together from day one. That doesn't make them better. It makes them consistent in a scarier way. Last reframe, because this is where viewers get tricked. If a trooper drops, does that prove the armor failed? Not automatically. Blaster impacts vary wildly in Star Wars depending on weapon, range, and story moment. If armor reduces lethality and blunts damage, you can still see someone go down. On screen, that reads like useless. In universe, it can mean recoverable instead of dead. And the people shooting Stormtroopers often use whatever hits hardest because they have to. Rebels, smugglers, and insurgents aren't supplying a galaxy-wide force. They punch above their weight with scavenged, upgraded, heavier-hitting gear whenever they can get it. The Empire standardizes because it has to supply, maintain, and train at galactic scale. So you watch standardized kits take non-standard heat and blame the armor for not being magic. That's the problem. So what's the final takeaway? Stormtrooper armor isn't meant to make someone invincible. It's meant to make the Empire's infantry output repeatable. It stabilizes the body in enclosed conditions. It reduces mission-ending secondary hazards. It keeps comms and perception usable under stress. It scales across worlds with modular add-ons. And the silhouette does the final job. It removes the person from the interaction because the Empire doesn't want judgment. It wants pressure that looks identical every time it arrives. So what scene sold you on Stormtroopers being terrifying, and what scene made them look like a joke? Drop both below. And if you've noticed any armor variant details people miss, call them out. If this was worth your time, hit like, subscribe, and stick around for more Star Wars tech deep dives. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.